All right, what is up, everybody? We are live. We are back for another weekly Wednesday live Q&A. Last week, I took a break, and this week we are back at a new time. We are going live at 6 p.m. Central Time. And this week, we are going to be talking about off-season dieting, training, all things off-season. So a very important part, of course, of our contest prep, of our bodybuilding, is our off season. We should spend the majority of our time in an off season, just because we need to pack on as much muscle as possible. So one of the things that I'll probably talk about is the length of the off season, and we will get into that eventually. But right now, as I always do, we will dive into the questions that came up on Facebook, and then everybody feel free to go ahead and chime in as you see fit, and we'll go for it. And no, Joe, I don't know what he's saying. This isn't a shirtless Facebook Live. All right. So the question that came up first was a really good one, and it's starting off strong. Sam asked, how strict are you with tracking, weighing out food, etc. in the off season? Do you weigh out to the gram, estimate, give yourself a range? So I always have, for the longest time, still stuck with macros, whether I'm in contest prep or whether I'm, in an off season. So I always go with macros. Now, in the off season, I would say probably 5 or 6 days a week, I'm very, very close to my numbers. And I would say probably 1 to 2 days a week, I do a little bit more of estimating. Now, that's not saying that on those days, I'm not still close. I'm just not necessarily bringing the scale out for every single meal. Now, most of the meals I will weigh out. In the off season, I would typically go out to dinner or lunch or whatever a little bit more. I would eat more at my in-laws' house and just kind of leave the scale in the pantry. They have one for me so that I can just weigh my food at all times. But as far as how often or how strict am I would say I'm more on the strict side. I still weigh myself weekly. Those of you who are following me know that I'm weighing myself daily now in contest prep. So even in the off season, I'm still weighing myself weekly just to make sure I'm not gaining enough weight, just to make sure I'm not losing a lot of weight. Now, as far as my food consumption goes, I would say that I'm more on the strict side. I don't necessarily recommend that for everybody just because they can get burnt out. And I think that's another question that's coming up. People are talking about, how they get burnt out in the off season as far as training and tracking goes. So I could see where people might be struggling with that. So for myself, 5 to 6 days a week, I'm pretty dang close. I'm still weighing things. And then on 1 to 2 days, I'm guesstimating a little bit more. But that works for me. I'm fine with it. I'm comfortable with it. I feel like if I'm not keeping track of my food, I end up under eating in the off season just because my intake does get very high. Right now, my intake is at roughly 3,000 calories, just a hair over, and I'm losing weight. So you guys know what I could potentially put down in the off season. Roughly in the off season, I'm putting down 4,000 calories, 4,200 calories. And if I'm not keeping track of those, I tend to undereat. So I just want to make sure that I'm in a surplus. And that's one of the main reasons. It's just where my metabolism is right now, and I can just handle a lot of food. So Sam, that was a great question to start off. All right, Matt asked, Matt Burgess to be precise here. There's a few Matts on thread here. When setting yourself up for off-season training, do you deload the volume or ramp it up? How many fun meals do you give yourself a week? All right, so there's 2 questions here from Matt. Off-season training, do I necessarily ramp it up? Yeah, if we're talking about like coming out of a contest prep, I think that's where Matt might be going in there. So let's just take that for an example, if that's what Matt meant. Ideally, if someone takes a long contest prep, I think that it would be a good idea to kind of start off very slow. So what I've done for some of my clients, what I've done for myself in the past, was out of the gate, let's say you're training 5-6 days a week throughout the entirety of your contest prep. Once the contest prep is over, drop that down to 4 or 5 days a week, sometimes even 3 days a week. Just because you put your body through so much stress and you're beating it up for such a long time, I give most of my clients like a 1 to 2 month range, just to take it easy, honestly. Just because I know that they're going to be taking a longer off season anyway, and we don't need to just slam it out of the gate. So ideally, I give them, let's say one training program where we might run it for 4 to 8 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. And then after that one, then we do start to bump it up. But I'm not a fan of just hitting it hard right out of the gate. I feel like that could actually do more harm than good, just because your body is very stressed, and you just don't want to put it in more harm's way. Brian, when I seen you tuned in, thanks for joining us. So Matt, very good question. Matt's second question is, how many fun meals do I give myself per week? Matt, I really don't do like fun cheat meals. I just don't necessarily like weigh it out to the gram. So for instance, if I were to go out to dinner with my wife's family, if I were to go over to their house, like I still eat responsibly. I don't just pig out. I've never actually been one to just like go eat a pizza or go eat a batch of cookies or just go eat like a ton of sushi. I actually don't even eat sushi. I don't know why I said that, but I don't really allow myself necessarily fun meals. I might have every now and then like a treat, let's say like it's a holiday and somebody bakes something, or, there's a piece of cake. Like I'll definitely have that. But I'm more often than not very strict with my numbers, even in the off season. And that certainly said, I don't like fun. I don't know if that's true, Matt. I like fun, but I don't like getting fat. So who knows? Whatever, take it how you want it. I don't go over my diet. All right. So good question, Matt. Now, Matt Jackson. A lot of Matts. I got a lot of Matts that are fans. And Matt Jackson said, Matt, thanks for joining, by the way. He said, I'll throw this one out there. I get asked this often, so a lot of you guys know who Matt Jackson is. Obviously, he was on a couple weeks ago. We had a great Q&A with Matt, and I really appreciated him coming on. He asked, cardio in the off season, how much and what type? So ideally, what I would like to see is, people do little to no cardio. I don't like to see a ton of cardio done in the off season. Now, if you're having a hard time controlling your weight, obviously we're going to throw in a little bit of cardio, but I think we just need to pay a little bit more attention to our diet. Now, I have some of my clients do cardio in the off season, just to keep their weight in check. And some people need it more than others, because some people, their bodies just respond, a little bit more negatively to food, and they tend to gain weight a little bit more quickly. Now, I'm not saying that they don't stick to their diets, because I'm under the impression that everyone is sticking to their diet that is working with me, unless they say otherwise. So what I've done with, I would say, about a third of my clients is just leave like one session of cardio in per week. I assign my cardio weekly, and usually I assign that as HIIT, just because it's a little bit more intense, and they could give an all-out once a week 8 to 10 minute burst of energy, and burn some calories. If it helps keeps their weight down, great. Honestly, and I feel like this one might be important too. It just like helps them keep like more athletic. If I were to say that. Just because a lot of people I work with are athletes, and we tend to just not move as much as we should in the off season. Now, if it's not assigned, and I personally do not do any cardio whatsoever in my off season, and probably a lot of people do not like me for that. And I really don't do a lot during my contest prep either, if we're being honest. I've yet to do a single session of cardio this contest prep. But what I do for myself, and what I find that has worked best for me, is just being conscious of staying active. So in my personal off season, which I've been in an off season for 3+ years, just about. And what I try to do is I go for a lot of bike rides with my wife. Sometimes I just go solo. There's a bike trail that's near my house. I go on that for, I've gone 10 miles the day before just because I thought it was fun. We go on, a little bit shorter bike rides or walks around the neighborhood. Recently we've been playing racquetball on the weekends. So it's something a little bit more fun. For those of you who know us a little bit more, who follow me on like the more personal level, you know that we like to go hiking. Like our honeymoon was to Colorado, and we spent a lot of time like whitewater rafting and hiking. So like those kind of things I do like in my off season to stay active. I don't just sit behind the computer and then lift weights, and then sit behind the computer and then lift weights. I try to stay a lot more active than people think. I'm not necessarily on the Stairmaster. I'm not necessarily, doing that kind of stuff, the conventional type cardio. So that works best for me. So what I'm getting at is what I'd like to see in the off season is you just stay more active in general. Now I know it's the winter time right now. So am I riding my bike? Absolutely not. Am I going for hikes? No. But I am playing racquetball now, which is inside. I just finished shoveling my driveway for the third day in a row. So that's a little bit of cardio too, for those of us who are up north who get tons of snow. We're going to get like 5-6 days of snow in a row here. So that's going to be some of my active cardio for the week. Not that it's assigned. Later on, I will have some cardio when we're in contest prep, but since we are focused on the off season, if you find that you just can stay active, awesome. If you have a more of a sedentary job and you need to, just get your cardio done in the gym, I would say 1 or 2 HIIT sessions a week. Keep it short, keep it sweet, 8 to 10 minutes. That's it. Focus more on your training and keep your intensity up. Matt, I hope you liked that answer. All right, guys. Matthias. For those of you who do not know Matthias, he is one of my clients from Sweden. He will be competing this year in the United States. So look out for him. Roughly August, September. He should be a lot of fun. But anyway, Matthias asked how to manage being a perfectionist without going overboard to the extent where it is detrimental. So Matthias, I would say, is one person that likes to do things to the gram, by the book, every set, every rep. And I can appreciate that. But what I said earlier, and I think what he's getting at, and I'll cover both with diet and training. So with diet, I feel like this is a little bit more important where he's coming from. So would I go to the exact gram in the off season? Would I weigh every single thing out that I eat in the off season? I answered that earlier in the video. The answer is no. So one thing, for instance, and I'll just use this as an example. I used to just kind of cup out rice, and then I would put it in a bin, and I would just scoop it out and then throw it in my to-go containers and take it on the way. Now that I'm in contest prep, when I cook rice, I weigh it out, dry beforehand, and then I cook it, and then right afterwards, I weigh everything, and then I portion it out equally across the board. So in my off season, the numbers might be slightly off. Contest prep, they're straight on. And that's one thing that I've done, at least like just as an example with rice or with pasta or anything like that. We're just taking like big measurements. Now I'm like to the gram. In the off season, you can eyeball it a little bit more. It doesn't necessarily have to be weighed. So maybe like in the off season, you could use measuring cups or stuff like that. When I'm in contest prep, I actually just weigh every single thing out. So that's one thing that you could do to not necessarily be like super anal about it, is just use measuring cups just out of convenience. And then scale, maybe your protein just to make sure you're getting enough in or actually not eating too much, depending on the source. Now, in regards to training, even though Matthias didn't necessarily mention that directly, perfectionism with training. So this is what I get a lot of questions actually from my clients in regards to like having a bad workout or just not feeling good from day to day. And in all honesty, like I made a post just the other day on Instagram, and it was about me not having a good day. And I mean, this is in contest prep, and I still get that in the off season. Now, it's not necessarily the same excuse, that I have in the off season that I do in contest prep, because in the post, I mentioned, depleted glycogen levels, being in a deficit for a long time, losing muscle mass, which I know I'm not losing any muscle mass just yet. But in the off season, sometimes, stress can get to you. Sometimes you don't get the amount of sleep that you need. There's just outside factors, that can cause you to have a bad workout. So if you're thinking that your entire off season is just going to be awesome workout after awesome workout after awesome workout, you're going to have a bad workout every now and then. I hate to tell you that. And I have them all the time. And it's not like every single day I'm having a bad workout, but let's look at it this way. Like if you're on point, like 9 workouts out of 10 or 9.5 workouts out of 10, like that's a lot of solid progress. If you're hitting PRs, in 9 workouts out of 10, so 90% of the time, you're going to make some really good progress. And if anybody were to tell you that they feel on all the time, they're just lying to you, because we all have those days where we go to the gym, we feel sluggish, the weights feel heavier. So we just can't beat ourselves up in the gym if we feel our strength drop, or we just have a poor performance. Secondly, we can't necessarily beat ourselves up in the off season if we're not spot on to our numbers, or if we see our weight fluctuate a little bit. Because we know in the off season what we should be focusing on is just progressive strength gain and muscle gain along with that. So if you see the scale, jumping around a little bit, if you look a little bit softer, these are the things that come with an off season. So we just have to kind of look back at the big picture and focus on the things that are important to us. So I know, a lot of us bodybuilders are perfectionists. We want to look a certain way. We need to weigh everything out to the gram. So we just kind of have to get out of that mentality and save it for contest prep, just because it can be overwhelming for some people. Now, I did already say that I do weigh out the majority of my food in my off season. I'm still tracking my weights, obviously, throughout the whole year as far as my lifts go. But going by feel in the off season is something that's all right to do. I don't necessarily encourage it, but just from a mental standpoint, some people just can't handle it, and that's where they get a little bit looser in the off season. I actually don't recommend that for any of my clients. Some people do that, but I just find that there needs to be some kind of structure in the off season, because you could easily just let yourself go if you don't have any accountability. And that's one thing that a lot of people lack in their off season is accountability, and also drive. And we'll get to that a little bit later, and a little bit of mental focus. All right, I went on a ramble there. Sorry about that. Tommy asked, how about the type of training during the off season? How about the type of training you do in the off season? Do you change a more strength program, or continue with maximum hypertrophy, 5x5, 3x10, so on and so on? So Tommy, and for those of you who follow my YouTube videos on my weekly training updates, even though I don't necessarily break them down in depth, which I probably should eventually. But as far as my training always involves some level of hypertrophy and some level of strength training. Now, this is on a personal basis, obviously. I feel like I just do better swaying towards the more hypertrophy side. Now, in the past, I have run strength-focused programs, pseudo powerlifter kind of programs. And that pains me to say, because if Genesis is watching, he is my gym nemesis, the powerlifting friend that I always spot in the gym. I actually, it beats me up, and my elbows hurt, my knees hurt, my back hurts, and that style of training is just not conducive to me, the super low rep ranges. It's just not something I can do for a long period of time. So I might incorporate, small blocks, where I am doing more of a strength phase, but I do sway more towards the strength phase. But right now, what I do is more of like a 50-50 split, or a 60-40 split, I would say. Probably 60% hypertrophy and 40% strength. So I train each body part 2 times a week. This is just me personally. And I train one day in the super high rep range, anywhere from 12 to 20, sometimes 25. And then on other days, I'm training from, like today, I squatted heavy. I squatted sets of 6. And then my accessory work, I went to 10. So it was still very heavy. I've always been a big fan of training twice per week and training in the 2 rep ranges. It just works better for me. Now, like I said, today I squatted 6, but then everything else was like 8 to 10. That is my heavy work. Now that may be someone's hypertrophy work. So Genesis, who I mentioned earlier, he is a power lifter. So the very different style of lifting, obviously, and he trains 5 reps and under, and his 5 reps is his hypertrophy work. And my 5 reps is my super duper low rep range. So you have to find really what works best with you and how your body responds. Like I said, I cannot hang with a powerlifting style of program. My central nervous system does not handle it well. My joints don't handle it well. And my tendons are screaming. I mean, right now I'm battling a little bit of tendonitis. I got this band on. That is something I've always dealt with from a very young age, honestly, through my baseball career. And it just kind of, came into weightlifting too. As much tension as we put on our body, on our tendons, on our muscles, from time to time, we're going to get injuries. Right now, it's not necessarily holding me back. It might be hindering me a little bit on my upper body movements, but today's leg movements were totally fine. But getting back to the main point is that you really just have to, find what percentage works best for you and what's your main goal. Like, can you go into the gym every single day and lift heavy and still feel fine? Then great, then do it. I would still encourage you to do some hypertrophy work. Or are you someone who absolutely, if you do a set of 3, you're going to feel like you're going to explode? Well, then I would obviously recommend, you doing sets of 3 or 5. You should do sets of 6 to 8 for your low range. That happens to be me, and that's what I do, at least for myself. And for the majority of my clients, now some of my clients love the more of the powerlifting style of programming. They like going into the gym and hitting a set of 3 for squats, for deads, for bench. That really gets me going. Me, on the other hand, it just taxes the hell out of me, so I do not do it because I want to spend my time more appropriately for my goals and for what I'm more comfortable doing. Bronwyn asks, finally getting to Bronwyn's question, must have supplements during the off season. So if we go back, I did a whole Q&A on supplementation. So I'm obviously not just going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about supplements, even though we probably could. So what we will do is just break it down simply here. So in the off season, what I always recommend would probably be some kind of joint supplements. Once again, I struggle with a little bit of joint pain, especially if we are lifting heavier weights. So a joint supplement, I would say creatine being number 2. I've said fish oils in the past. If you go watch that supplementation video, I have said fish oils. Hopefully in your off season, you're eating more fats and you're getting in the right kinds of fats. So maybe not even a fish oil. So I would say a multivitamin on top of that being 3. You probably should be taking in some kind of higher quality protein source too. So maybe that's 4, just to make sure, since our body weight is a little bit higher, that the quality of protein, since our food is a little bit higher. A lot of people don't realize that there is a lot of trace protein in like the carbohydrate sources that we eat. So I would say just make sure we're having, a good source of protein, especially post-workout. I take protein year-round no matter what, 2 scoops, whether I'm in contest prep or in the off-season. And then if I had to say one more, I guess this would be for the guys. If you're really looking to optimize your results, and I don't know if this is necessarily a must-have, but I've been doing it, and it's running natural test boosters throughout my off-seasons. This last off-season was probably the most I've ever ran them. I wasn't necessarily on them, obviously, for all 3 years, but I would say this last year, I've spent the majority of the time on natural test booster, or at least cycling on and off natural test boosters. So for the guys, I would say a natural test booster, really just to optimize the muscle growth in the off-season. All right, Lydia asked another one. How do you manage personal training time with client time at your gym? How to fight a burnout. So what Lydia is getting at, and I know her and what she's doing, so she is a competitor, but she also works at a gym. And for me, maybe she's talking about like my time at the gym and then my time working on bodybuilding, how you don't get burnt out. And what I always do, I set myself up with a schedule, right? So In the morning, I typically answer emails. I'm writing Facebook posts. I'm coming up with what the hell I'm going to post on Instagram later in the day. And then midday, I take a break. All right, every day from noon to 2, I set a time up for myself where I'm going to work out. I'm not necessarily going to answer any emails. I'll be on Facebook a little bit, maybe in between sets if I really feel like, if I need to go on a status or something. And then I pick it back up, with emails in the afternoon. Obviously, today I made sure I was available. I didn't have any work to do this video. So anybody who works at a gym and works out at that gym, what I would recommend for you to do is actually have a time every single day and try to keep it the same. So for instance, like I set aside noon to 2 for myself. So if you know that you're going to be working out at, 8 o'clock in the morning, 8 to 10 every day, do not set any clients, don't even make it available, and that is your time. And put your headphones on, put your hood up, and get focused, right? You don't want anybody bothering you during that time frame, and then make yourself available otherwise. And I know it's a struggle, and we have actually some trainers from other gyms who train at my gym just to get away from theirs because people bother them all the time, and it's just hard to get focused. So if you're a trainer at your own gym and you have to lift there, which I feel like a lot of people do, always just try to set aside a time when the gym is slower for you to work out. So if that time is on lunch break, go for it. That way you could just have you time. Like for me, I typically don't answer emails between 12 and 2. And I feel like a lot of my clients kind of know that by now. They know that that's the time that I'm lifting. Sometimes I post stuff, sets on Instagram, and everybody kind of knows that I'm lifting during that time frame, and that I'm really not going to be too responsive to emails or inquiries or whatever. So my recommendation is set a time frame and keep that, black it out, leave it for yourself. Now, Jeff did ask a question that I'm actually going to cover next week, and that's going to be the approach to contest prep from a mental standpoint. So, Jeff, I'm going to get to yours next week. That is going to be the topic, spoiler alert, for next week. So I'm actually going to skip over Jeff's question this week, and we're going to dive deep next week. All right, Julie asked, I think I've asked this before, but I need a refresher. Should you be hungry between meals in your off season? Does that mean you're not eating enough? How should your hunger levels be in the off season compared to prep, aka team always hungry and slightly annoyed by it? So I mean that is a very good question, and actually that is the last question that was asked today. So if anybody has any more questions regarding off season, please feel free to ask them more in the live stream, and then we'll get to that. But in regards to Julie's question, in the off season, and what I've always said is you just want to make sure, obviously, you're eating enough where you're not losing weight, and then maybe eating enough where you're slightly gaining a little bit of weight. As far as from a satiating standpoint, it can be very tough if you feel like you're stuffing yourself. I've been there. It is not comfortable. At one point in time, I was eating roughly about 700 grams of carbs a day. Yes, I said 700. And that was painful because I was eating, just massive servings of pasta and rice and everything. And that was it was really hard to get down. And it's just something that I wasn't comfortable with. Now, my weight really wasn't going anywhere. It was staying the same. So I did keep upping it, and that's how I got to 700. And it was something that I did for a while. I think my carb sources at the end of it just didn't get too healthy. Honestly, I felt myself, eating more sugary stuff probably than I should have. So I lowered it and I exchanged it for a little bit healthier sources of carbohydrates. But at that point, I just felt absolutely terrible, eating that much. So I would say if you're really struggling to get, in that much carbohydrates, let's say you're stuffed. I would say don't eat if you're getting sick. And then if you're on the other spectrum, if you're hungry, yeah, absolutely, go ahead and eat, but just make sure your weight's not shooting through the roof. That's one thing that a lot of people let themselves go in their off season, and they gain an exorbitant amount of weight because they feel like they could eat anything. When in reality, like Julie said, it might actually be a good thing if you're slightly hungry in between meals. And I'm not saying you have to be ravenous like you are during contest prep, or you have to drink gallons of water, which I know some people do. I mean, I'm on my second gallon here, and I've barely drank any of it. So clearly, I'm not that deep in a prep. But a lot of people have to, drink a lot of water just to keep themselves satiated during contest prep. So I'm not saying to be ravenous during your off season, but just make sure maybe you're a little bit hungry, and that way, you don't have to force feed yourself, because that's just a very uncomfortable situation to be in, is having to force feed yourself. And I mean, I was still eating, 5 or 6 times a day when I was eating 700 grams of carbs, and it was just a lot to get in. So yeah, Julie, I would say keep track of your weight, obviously. If you're hungry, eat, but don't force feed yourself. And if you're starving, go ahead and eat more. And I did have one more question on Instagram. It was more of a statement. Somebody said that they gained an exorbitant amount of weight, and they in their off season, and they're kind of looking for help. So what I always recommend is really just getting back on the horse, keeping track of your calories, and however that happened, if you just freeballed it, or if you just kind of went off your rocker for a little bit and didn't care about calories, I would say get back to tracking religiously, or at least within rough ranges, to help the weight come down a little bit. And then you can go from there, right? If you need to hone in your skills a little bit, if you need to actually go to set macros, that's one thing that if you gain, a lot of weight in your off season, obviously it's going to take a long time for it to come off if you want to preserve muscle. So I do not recommend you getting super duper heavy in your off season, especially if you plan to compete soon. Now, I will close it with this, because I always like to use myself as an example. Obviously, I've been in an off season for an extended amount of time. My body weight got up to about 207 pounds as the high. And right now I'm sitting at probably about 188. I'll probably weigh in tomorrow. So I'm significantly under that. I'm 20 pounds under that mark. So yeah, I did let my body weight go high this off season on purpose, because I knew from stage to stage that I was not going to compete anytime soon. Like I said, 3+ years. For those people who are competing every other year, I would really recommend you keeping better track of your weight and your food intake in your off seasons. For those people who only track during contest prep, and then in their off seasons they just blow up, they eat whatever they want, that's a very dangerous game to play, because that's when you gain 40 pounds, you gain 50 pounds, and then you have to try to lose it in a short amount of time in order to compete. That just sets you up for a very, very bad cycle, and just puts you in a very bad place for weight loss, because, if you're gaining 40 pounds, like, how much of that really is muscle after a contest prep? Probably not. Now, we all lose muscle, a little bit of muscle during a contest prep, especially us natural athletes. But I would say off season, keep your weight under control in correlation to when you are competing next. So guys, that is going to wrap it up for the Q&A tonight. I do appreciate all of you tuning in at the new time at 6 p.m. Central. I'm actually going to move these videos to 6 o'clock. Before I had it at 7. I wanted to push to 6 to see what kind of the viewers we could get. I've had some people tell me that they're in class, that they're in work, and that earlier would be better. Obviously, everybody can watch these on the replay, and they can also watch these on YouTube. I have my whole Q&A series and my whole contest prep series on my YouTube channel, so please go ahead and rewatch them there as much as you want. Let them play as you're doing your off-season cardio. Let you hear my voice as much as sometimes maybe you don't want to. But guys, have a great night. Once again, thank you for tuning in, and keep crushing it. Until next time, see you later.